So now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid to say that you're stuck with me for another session. Mr. Sacker will be returning for the final session then on funding the transition. So we're going to go head on, and I would invite my panellists to join me now on the podium. Madame Catherine Gisela-Laniel, Martin Lavacek, Jürgen Tack once again, and Stefania Vanzini. And you can be seated then next to me. I'll just introduce you all, and then you can save your warm round of applause for my speakers then in one moment. I don't think there's many introductions to be made, but just to formally launch my panel discussion. First up on my right, I have Madame Catherine Gisela-Laniel, who is the Director in charge of Strategy and Policy Analysis in the Commission's Directorate General for Agriculture and Rural Development since January 1st, 2023. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as I said last year, many might say that Catherine is now well placed to climb the ranks even higher in the top echelons of DG Agri. We're still waiting for that, of course, to see a woman at the very top of DG Agri. But anyway.
We'll never stop.
Okay, it's about time though, Catherine, right? It's about time. Next to you, Martin Lavacek, who is a Czech member, rather, that's a Freudian slip there, Martin, a Czech member of the European Parliament for the Renew Europe political group, and who is running again, as I understand it, in the European elections in early June. Martin is a member of the EP's Committee on Agriculture and Rural Development and the delegation to the EU-Turkey Joint Parliamentary Committee. Welcome, Martin, good to see you again. Jürgen Tack, who we heard from earlier, who needs no introduction in this House in any case, who is the Secretary General of the European Landowners Organisation, and who has an interesting message, but that will be revealed in a moment. And last, but by no means least, at the end of the panel, we have Stefania Avanzini, who is the Director of One Planet Business for Biodiversity, OP2B, and a member of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development Extended Leadership Group. And the aim of the WBCSD is to scale regenerative agricultural practices and shift land use to protect biodiversity. So now, ladies and gentlemen, you can give my distinguished speakers a very warm round of applause. So any of you who have been following the debate thus far know that I run a very tight ship up here. So I would invite you to deliver your 5-minute impulse statement. This will be then followed by a question and answer session with myself, and then I will open up the floor at around 2:45 for questions in about half an hour or so. And you know the lay of the land now, ladies and gentlemen, for asking questions. We'll get microphones to you if you raise your hand. At around 3 o'clock then, we have another video message from the US Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack. Okay, so Catherine, when you're ready, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Just wanted, if I may stand up.
Please go right ahead.
Thank you. Just wanted to share with you some thoughts about where we stand with the transition of food system, at least from my perspective. I wouldn't dare to say from Commission's perspective, but at least from my perspective. I think we can start saying that we've delivered many achievements at EU level over the last decades, and particularly I would say also over the last couple of years. When it comes in particular to resilience, this sector has been extremely resilient. It's good to mention it again. Better? Okay. And in particular, after the COVID, the consequences of, which are ongoing also, of the war in Ukraine, we can see that our sector has been able to deliver our daily food. So that's very good. Not being complacent, we realize also that we have assessed and reviewed also the risk and the vulnerabilities of our food supply chain. Good when you feel you deliver, that you look at your weaknesses and the threats, and we have identified a couple of them on which we need to continue to further work. Dependence to chemical inputs, dependence to feed imported from third countries. I'm not saying we shouldn't import, but I'm just saying that we have a lot of dependence here. The fact that our diet have not evolved in a way which is more healthy and necessarily helping also to build more resilience in particular. When it comes to sustainability, here more difficult to measure, though we have a lot of indicators. we published, I don't know whether you saw that, but at the end of last year, we published what we've called the Sustainable Agri-Compass. These are not new data. This is just a new presentation and a collection of data that we have collected over the last 20 years, and on the basis of about 25 indicators related to the 3 pillars of sustainability, and I like to insist on the 3 pillars, economic, environment, and social, we can see where we are doing a better job and where we need to further work. When it comes to farmers' income, when it comes to reduction of greenhouse gas emission, though we should recognize that Europe is the only region in the world where agriculture has reduced its greenhouse gas emission. Biodiversity, maybe, no, sure, we can do better. So you would see here that though we've made progress, this is rather slow and there is further work to be done. Of course, these achievements are the result of the work of the key economic players of the food chain, not just the result of the policymakers, I like to say. This has been said in the former session. It's you, the economic players and the stakeholders of the food chain who are delivering the more resilient and sustainable food supply chain. But of course, I dare to say that there has been some achievement in terms of also policy action in relation in particular with the implementation of the Farm to Fork strategy. I realize that this may be bold to mention the Farm to Fork strategy here, but I think we can safely say that in particular in the area of agriculture we've delivered, and let me mention that the brand new CAP, what was adopted, this was part of the Farm to Fork strategy. So a CAP which is bringing more support, some farmers would say today too much administrative burden, but more support for better agricultural practices and systems that helps, to protect and nurture our natural resources and our climate. But obviously, where we are now is that we can see that this is not fast enough, and this has created also a lot of discontent. And we need to acknowledge that. Of course, here I'm referring to the farmers' protests that we've seen over the last couple of months and which continue, and which have also resulted into action from a lot of people, member states, and policymakers at EU level. You mentioned, the fact that as we speak, the Council is discussing our simplification proposal. They are also discussing a non-paper on how we can strengthen farmer position in the food chain, because this is not just about reducing administrative burden, this is also how do we improve also farmers' income so that they have more possibility to invest for the transition. So this is important. I would say maybe that looking at the next 5 years, what would we need to do? And maybe that could trigger a discussion. First of all, I think that we need to further engage. You had this morning a short presentation by the chair of the strategic dialogue, so I will not come back to that, but this is an important element of the conversation, but this is not only the strategic dialogue. Why do we need to engage? Because I do believe that we need to align our objectives and our work and our strategies. As I said, it's not the policymakers who will deliver the transition, but together, working together, if we have a shared vision, shared objective, and then we set the policy tools that create the enabling environment, we can deliver effectively. I think also in terms of the EU policy mix, we need to better integrate our policy across the food chain, but also between environment, climate, economy. So everything that is looked at in terms of protection on environment and climate, we need also to make sure that, we can continue to remain competitive and that the different stakeholders in the food chain can continue to get a decent livelihood. Consistency of the policy mix is also important. And then I think nothing will happen by coincidence. It's of course about alignment, it's about working together, it's about the good enabling environment, legislative and policy environment. This is also about continuing to invest in our food systems. And invest meaning, of course, funding, not just public money. Private money, of course, is also important. Making sure also that we help our farmers to de-risk the transition. Changing your practices and your farming systems result into risk, so that's important. And with this, I think I can stop.
Great, Catherine. Thank you so much. Please join me here again. I'll come back to you with some of those points that you raised on the implementation of the Farm to Fork strategy. And thank you for that tour d'horizon that you just presented, Catherine. So Martin, you're chomping at the bit there, I can see. So you're keen to give your tuppence worth. So we look forward to hearing from you from the Renew Europe perspective. And running again, I understand it, right, in early June. So you're coming from the European Parliament's point of view. So we look forward to hearing from you, Martin.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I can save you some time because I can afford to be perhaps more explicit. I start from the back. What did we learn? I think we have learned a couple of quite basic things. First, that complex solutions, complex issues have no simplistic or simple solutions. And we had multiple experience, no? Sour, pesticides being some of them. We have also learned that if there is a basic conflict at a assumption/principle level, you cannot bypass it by political ambition. And we have also learned, well, not us, but I think many, that we have a group of society here, where a well-used, industry-oriented, imposed strategy will not work. I think these are the three basic learnings we have had over the past 18 months. Now, let me just come back on the very issue of where basic conflict in assumption will inevitably not help us to lead to a positive outcome. And here, and I stay today by purpose a little bit aerial, because we have a lot of actions here and projects and everything that people present, but I think we sometimes forget that we still have this conflicting element at the very baseline. The one that when we talk about public policy incentivizing certain direction, in our concrete terms, it means how to deal with negative externalities perceived by society and how to correct them by a policy making. We shall not forget that that will have inevitably effect on distribution of value. And that distribution of value, economically speaking, breaks down into evaluation of assets and evaluation of goods. And this is the impact that we see inevitably. We were not able to transfer our policy ambitions and societal needs into a viable business model. This is all about it. Why? Because we see the distribution of value is not following our objectives. So we need to come back and find a way, and now I will be very concrete, how to make sure that the value of landowners and farmers will increase with increasing amount of non-productive activities on the land. How? When it comes to goods, the value of goods on the shelves of supermarkets will increase with the increasing participation of the entire value chain from the farm to the fork, if we will, with the amount of externalities and compensation for them that is involved in it. And once we start to find solutions that will help us to match this, meaning to have a framework that will allow a market to redistribute this value, we will have no longer conflict. We will have no longer issue. I've been talking about it on multiple on multiple sessions. I think we should focus on evaluation of our farming systems, and I honestly would spend much more of the public money we have available today to allow the attributes of the production, and we have to make a choice. Is it emission or something else? I think it should be more emissions. It should be what I call chemicals, fertilizers, pesticides combined. It should be welfare. It should be biodiversity. Can we somehow evaluate those externalities that we ask all farmers, and based on how they are running, to link it to the product that is then passing along the entire value chain? Because then we would have it fairly remunerated.
Okay.
But I think we sometimes are not even searching in this area.
That was raised, actually, that exact point was raised just before lunch, Martin. So taking the externalities on board, but then you need to get consumers. You need to get consumers on board, right? Then, I mean, do you see a problem there?
No, I see, because we had a quite illustrative example with our organic failure, no?
How do you mean, what's the organic failure?
This is one of the rare areas that we have well established. We have it regulated, we know what the rules are, and if the market goes nicely, we can even see some compensation. But when we have a market failure, when we have a trouble, then suddenly half of our farmers are selling organic for a price of conventional. Because first,
is that the experience in the Czech Republic?
That means we do not have, and mainly Germany, you could have seen it in multiple places. So this is where it doesn't work. It works well when the weather is nice. We have some good examples, but when the weather is getting nasty, it doesn't work. That means the mechanism is not well established.
Okay. We'll return to that in a moment, because I know Catherine might like to get back there on organic policy, particularly when we're moving towards what is a 30% objective, isn't it, by 25 by 2030. Okay, Catherine, Martin, thank you both. Now, Jürgen, your intervention is going to be an interesting one. I'm not going to say any more. When you're ready, your 5 minutes commences. I think you need a hand, though, right?
Yeah, that will come later.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, have you noticed that today we are speaking especially about what farmers can do, how they can do that, what farmers think, what farmers should do? But what we are not talking about is that what farmers think policymakers should do. That's what they are trying to explain at Schumann at this moment. And yesterday, we had a Future for the Forests event. And there was a very particular thing, because if people are planting trees and you're adding forest to our planet, people do that in acres and hectares. But if the speakers were discussing deforestation, they were speaking about football fields. So it's very strange that we are planting in acres, but what we are destroying is in football fields. The reality behind that is that we need a good visual, because a football field is much more practical, explainable for people, just to show how much is disappearing. And so I was asking myself the question, what can I do to show to you what the frustration is for farmers, but in the most visual way? And indeed, I have two assistants, I would say, come on stage, and you have a very specific task. Ladies and gentlemen, on this side I have Oscar. It's the first time Oscar is coming to the forum. He's a trainee at ELO, and he's immediately on stage. Give him an applause. Because of gender balance, we have Anne-Sophie on the other side, so you should give her an applause too. And what is this? This is a visual representation of the period of the present Commission. 4 years and 3 months. Starting on the 1st of January 2000, on the other side, we have today. In between, we have a timeline, and I have put on that timeline the front page of every dedicated act with an immediate effect on agriculture. 158 documents. And to be completely honest, we did not agree on the nature restoration law, so I have to remove that. We still have 157. If we take all of those documents, and I would print the full version, I would have close to 10,000 pages. What do we expect from our farmers? To read all of this? That would mean that they have to read, analyze, try to understand 15 pages per day. They are not doing that. They have found a solution for that because they are hiring agricultural consultants. And I have to be careful because we have quite some of them in the room. What are those agricultural consultants doing? They are reading this and they are translating those documents into the most profitable business model for the farmer. And the farmer is doing that. Most of those agricultural consultants are earning more than the average farmer, we have to agree. But that makes that farmers are taking action in their field, which is quite disconnected with what policymakers are trying to do. And that makes it extremely difficult for them to really engage in biodiversity, to really engage in climate change. And I should be somewhere over here. Yes, this is more or less the moment that we had the first negative vote in the European Parliament on the nature restoration law. All of those documents, ladies and gentlemen, there was no stakeholder engagement. And then Frans Timmermans left. And all of a sudden, we needed stakeholder engagement. Today, me and my organization, we are getting more invitations for stakeholder engagement. We are not even able to go to everything anymore. But for one or the other reason, on average, we want like to have the same number of stakeholder moments than we had in the past. If we are really interested in having systemic change, I'm very sorry, all of those documents are not contributing to that. They are making changes to existing legislation, to existing systems. If we really want to have systemic change, let's start from a blank page. Let's sit together in a decent way. Farmers, landowners, foresters, they do know that there is a climate problem. They do know that there is a biodiversity problem. They are the ones in the field who are seeing it every day. Give them respect, talk to them, and build something which is working. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Jürgen, message delivered loud and clear, I think, to both the forum and the policymakers in the room, MEPs, etc. And I suppose you're right in saying that the strategic dialogue, one might say, has come a little bit late in the administration, but more on that later. We'll discuss that in a moment in a very convivial atmosphere. But before, now it's a hard act to follow, Stefania, but I am going to ask you now to deliver your perspective, and then we'll go back to more panel debate afterwards. So Stefania, please go right ahead.
No, thank you, Jürgen, for this very visual presentation. But I have the privilege to represent a coalition of ag value chain players that 5 years ago decided to invest in the future of agriculture, that 5 years ago understood the importance to drive systemic solutions. And so what I want to talk about is not words, but really action on the ground. And you were mentioning, it's sometimes also a word of semantic, but why are ag value chain players and also millions of farmers today transitioning to more resilient farming systems? Because it's the resiliency of their businesses that is at stake. Why are ag value chain players investing millions? Because it's the resiliency of their business that is at stake. So the first thing that I just want to emphasize is we're not doing this because of global ESG pressure, though it is imported for listed companies, but moreover, it's for your business resilience. So that's the point number one on why, which is important. The second thing is how, because the truth is ag value chain players today are supporting farmers to transition. So how are they doing it? And I think there are 4 important levers that off-takers are taking and other financial actors too. The first one is how am I supporting with technical assistance? How am I financing independent agronomic advice that is supporting farmers to transition? The second is how am I offering long-term contracts to farmers so that they have the stability during the transition phase and they can predict also that they will continue to have their clients. And most importantly, ag value chain players, we heard also before in the panel, they're all promoting price premiums. And I think one of the most systemic levers that at least we have consensus on is how can we shift from a practice-based to a results, outcome-based incentive systems. Because as we know, if we focus on results, if we focus on outcomes, we give agency to farmers, to ag value chain players, to innovate, also we were talking very important, and to really just agree on the results. And so this is probably the most important systemic levers that we as a collective coalition are working on. And so since 5 years, we have really tried to drive convergence on coordinated demand signals. So what are ag value chain players, for example, willing to pay farmers for the environmental outcomes they can measure and report on at farm level? I want to acknowledge the beautiful work that SCI Platform has done, aligning over 200 ag value chain players on farm level indicators. And we're also taking it also to the next level. And how can we then align also on the way farm level indicators that influence corporate reporting and disclosure, ESG level indicators. This is very important because we were talking about the market dynamics. And what we also want to know is coordination on the way on demand signals will trigger 2 things. First of all, it's coordinated monetization. That's very important. On the other side, it's coordinated valuation. Martin, you were mentioning this. If we actually all align and give strong signals to the financial actors on how we evaluate soil, what is a healthy soil? Does it value more than unhealthy soils or soils in poor conditions like we have in Europe? These are important signals that can drive market dynamics and change. So this is one of the things that we're really working on, and that is important for us. And then last but not least, there are also many financial actors today that are offering better loan terms, better insurance premium conditions. And is it enough? That's the first thing, because these things are happening on the ground. Isn't enough? And the truth is, no, it's not enough because the short-term risks are still on the shoulders of the farmer, the costs and the risks. That's why we talk about mitigating the risk or de-risking the transition for farmers. But the truth is, and this is the second systemic change, the systemic lever that I see is, we have funding, there is funding. There are investments we have the investments in agriculture. What's more important is how can we gear those investments towards the future, not towards financing the status quo, but how can we move in investments, public and private, so that they invest in the future, in our resiliency, and how can we trigger more collaboration, more private and public collaboration. We cannot expect, and Jürgen, you were talking about, now there is a zillion of consultants helping farmers, but we cannot expect from a farmer that he actually goes to a bank, to an insurance company, to different payments for ecosystem services, to his off-taker, and probably even to apply for a grant for a technical assistant. This is just too complex. So I think the role that ag value chain players and actors here in the room with policymakers have to play is how can we build a coordinated financing mechanisms that farmers can apply for, and this will give me access to a grant for my technical assistance, to CapEx and OpEx, that I can use for the transition. And this would, in my opinion, tremendously accelerate the transition. And I just want to then close on another important thing, because I agree on one thing, is that often ag value chain players, we have put in a lot of focus on farmers, but here we're talking about food systems transformation, and ag value chain players have a big role to play. And I just want to emphasize, we have just published with the Food and Land Use Coalitions today 2 reports that are really addressing agriculture for agriculture and food value chain players that elevate two things. First of all, what my members in my coalition know well is that the emerging voluntary standards and reporting and disclosure are actually really paving the way. So ag value chain players will have to report and disclose on how they're reducing, for example, their climate emissions. And the European Union is very much leading the way with the CSRD, the CDD, and the UDR. So we can also see how this is also influencing policymaking and vice versa, and this is happening in many countries. And the second report I think is interesting, is really showcasing how much should ag value chain players invest to reduce their climate emissions. And the number is to half climate emissions. Ag value chain players need to invest 205 billion euros a year, which is approximately 2% of food revenues. So even though the number seems big, this is approximately the investment that has been estimated by the Food and Land Use Coalition. I think I'll finish up.
Thank you very much, Stefania. We're just a little bit, we're getting short on time there, and I do want to come back with questions to my panelists, so thank you for that, and that's an interesting perspective. And you spoke last night as well at our dinner about the idea of collaborative financing as well, so we'll pick up on some of those points in a moment. But I want to go back, I suppose, to yourself, Catherine, if you don't mind. We heard just before lunch there from Professor Peter Strohschneider, and Jürgen raised it so eloquently with his visualization there. There is a lot of talk about the strategic dialogue, but I suppose a simple question is, why didn't this start 5 years ago when we launched the European Green Deal, when we launched the initiatives under the Farm to Fork strategy? This time last year, your former colleague, Frans Timmermans, was our guest of honour. Now, obviously, he decided to leave then for domestic politics, and that's a whole different other equation, and he's not here to defend himself. But you now, you're in your current role as Director for Strategy and Policy Analysis. We can see a direct linkage here, I think, between, let's just say, politics prevailing, the EPP, for example, realising very quickly that they're losing that grasp on the farmer base, Ursula von der Leyen looking for a second mandate, and hey presto, we've got a strategic dialogue of the future of agriculture. I suppose going back to Jürgen's point that it's a little bit late in the day to be bringing a strategic dialogue at the end of your mandate with just mere months to go before the end of this administration. So maybe a point on that, and then we'll continue then afoot.
If you allow me, Rosa, before I answer your question.
Do you have more papers?
No, because I guess I'm like you. I like stories. I like stories with happy end.
Please.
And I'm afraid that the story from Jürgen was there was no end and no happy end.
You need help.
Okay, Catherine is coming back with a plum, I see. Okay.
So here, in this guirlande, here is the CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy. Yes. So heads of states and government, on the basis of the proposal of the Commission, have allocated for the 7-year periods over 300 billion euros for our farmers. I guess we need to mention that because I think it's important. We're going to all vote during the week of 6 to 9 June. So if, and I know that you're all experts, but if we get out of the room saying, well, forget about Europe, you know, it's just bureaucracy. I think we need to be fair. Yes, there are lessons to be learned, and probably dialogue should have been more important. But personally, with my colleagues, we never stopped to talk to farmers and the key stakeholders of the food chain. So lessons learned. Now let's move to the table and work together and enjoy the fact that we have, and we're probably one of the unique sectors in Europe to get advantage of such, you know, an important policy. And of course, it's not just about this policy. There are many other policies, as this was illustrated. So let's integrate that into an EU policy mix, which is much more consistent, coherent, and that we have discussed together prior to its implementation. So that would be my answer.
Good response. Good retort, Catherine. Well, we can't really match that, ladies and gentlemen. But one more question, Catherine, when you return. having told us the end of that story, and it's a fair point as well. I mean, the budget is significant, as you said, right? What is it, 57 billion per year?
It's a third of the EU budget.
But on that note, Catherine, and maybe you might fill us in on discussions ongoing in the European Commission at the moment. Everybody will be looking at that slice of the pie from now on. We're talking about defence policy, we're talking about enlargement, and we haven't even brought up enlargement today, and that's a massive challenge coming down the tracks, right? We're not even talking about Ukrainian enlargement, other countries, Bosnia-Herzegovina, the Balkans, etc. So there's going to be major challenges on that budget. Patrick Child mentioned it just before lunch about the multi-annual financial frameworks, but what sort of discussions are ongoing at the moment in the European Commission when it comes to this future direction of travel for the CAP and the budget to align with it?
Okay, so the preparation of the next multi-annual financial framework, as we call it, so the resources for the European Union for the 7 years starting as of 2028, along with the next common agricultural policy will be for the next college, so the next commission to decide. The calendar is around about summertime for the next multi-annual financial framework, and for the next CAP, the legislative proposal is expected to be on the table in autumn 2025. So, okay, so it doesn't work.
Keep going.
Yeah, okay. So, so that's why, coming back to your point, it's the strategic dialogue. This kind of important event, but also many meetings that we have are so timely, I would say, because this is the right moment to engage, not just about the resources that we will get and the next CAP, but what do we want to achieve together, how to do that, you know, because the direction of travel has not been contested, I've heard. So basically, how can we deliver that? What are the right tools? What are we missing? What is the pace? How the stakeholder also can help, meaning working, as I said, it's not only the policymakers who will deliver the transition. It's important that, for example, the farmers are working also with their customers, with their suppliers, with the different players across the food chain, because farmers in isolation will not be able to deliver the transition. This is where we are. Yep. So that's the beginning. And this kind of discussion is, of course, very timely. And basically, we need to see how the CAP will be integrated into the EU policy mix to provide support. It's not just the CAP who will be necessary, but the CAP can help. Are there other kind of investment also that we need to do in the food chain to help the transition? That's very important. And of course, as part of the conversation also, we need to see how we want and that comes back to the previous intervention, how we use the different tools that we have. I talk about a policy mix, so basically what is it about? Legislation, incentive, financial incentives, soft law. We have different tools in our EU policy mix. And of course, not everything is done at EU level, but this is important to set the right policy mix at EU level. Okay. So let's discuss this.
Let's discuss, and that's exactly where we're at now, I suppose, looking ahead to another administration. Martin, you wanted to jump in there, but I do have a question, and I would like to get to it from our online participants, and you might, okay, I'm just getting a message as well. Can you remove your earrings, Catherine, because that's impacting on the mic. So, Martin, our question to you is, for dealing with the problem of evaluating externalities, can we solve case by case, or does it require a bigger starting point? Do you understand that question?
That's why I said we have to come to the beginning, okay? And perhaps it's a pity we didn't have a discussion back then, because you have to align the creation of value with the policy objectives. It's very simple. Okay? if you ask someone using the land in a way that it is depreciating, because it is illusion. We hear it here again today. It is illusion still today with the framework of evaluating assets we are having in place to tell farmer, if you run more of a non-productive activities on your land, it will increase in value. It is our, of course, sustainability way of reflection. But if you look at the market agent who comes on the field, when the farmer wants to sell the land, he is estimating, evaluating, and putting it on the paper. And it's simply not the case. The reality is on the other way around. And this is the same with the products. And I think we need it even more, coming back to what was mentioned here. Yes, it is fair to say that this is a monster policy within the European budget, but at the same time, it is fair to say that these are still the same billions in absolute terms we had in farming 20 years back. And that today we are coming to a borderline of 10–11% of the farming revenues when it comes to public spending, which you can draw a logical outcome is the CAP in the future, if it shall continue in addressing negative externalities by forcing the farming community or incentivizing the farming community going into the right direction, is it going to be potent enough to the challenge that is ahead of us? Very unlikely, because the €1 we are having today is half of the value of the euro we had 20 years back, and we still have the same amount. That's why I'm saying the value, if we like it or not, if we want to have systemic change, the money are on the market. And why we have opposition here today to what we are asking? Because the value is not fairly distributed. That means that a business case for some, for a transition, is lucrative enough on the expense of someone else who has said what? Stop. I will not accept it. And everybody is surprised? Well, they should not be, because farming is still a constituency. It's not a business. You have a farmer in every village across the continent. So you have a political grip, much better than any type of industry. And farmers said, no, we will no longer allow that all this transition is made on our expense with all the billions we receive. But sorry, to the challenge that is ahead of us, it is becoming disproportionate. And we don't have to have lonely riders or free ticket riders from a processors or a retail or wholesale and others. No, we really need to reinvent the wheel from the basic in a way what is going to look like the next agri-food value chain for the future that will redistribute the value. And we have something. I am the last one to be an advocate of having ETS for agri-food chain, because I think we should have something different than that. Mm-hmm. But you see logically that in some areas, the redistribution of value is there.
I might just go to Jürgen now, if you don't mind. Thank you for that, Martin. Just in reaction to the points made there by Martin and Catherine especially, I suppose. I mean, it's a fair, reaction to your visualization about the budget and maybe the budget challenges that are, as I say, coming ahead. What's sort of your take in sort of like the shape of policy? Like, what's your vision when you look ahead? You're now SecGen of the ELO, so when you think of, like, we're talking about the strategic dialogue on the future of agriculture, what does the future of agriculture look to someone like you?
Well, if I would compare it with the way that we have our children at home every Sunday evening, they come to have dinner, the first thing we do is we decide what we are going to eat. And then we are making a list with the ingredients, we buy them, and then we cook. And I think that order is rather important, because if we start with cooking first and only then start thinking about what we are going to eat, then we are running into problems. And I think it's very important that we first think about what we want before we start really start cooking. And let's say the strategic dialogue is for us a great instrument. It would have been logic if it would have been before the Green Deal, because let's say you first decide what you want to cook, then you buy the ingredients, and then you start cooking. Let's say the strategic dialogue is a good starting point towards the next common agriculture policy. But let's say it's a start for the next cycle. It's a missed opportunity of the farmers' cycle. If we look to the future, then I think, let's say, if you're really searching for a systemic change, we really have to be able and to be willing to rethink a number of elements completely. And I think that because, and I'm speaking from my organization, but I'm speaking about, I think, over a lot of organizations here present in the room, we all have something to win out of the present CAP, and we do not want to lose that. Mm-hmm. And so that makes that every lobby organization is going to lobby to keep that. That's not the way to reach systematic change.
Okay, that's a fair point, keeping the status quo. I'm going to open it up now to the audience, ladies and gentlemen. If there's anybody interested in raising their hands, I would welcome a question. Right down there. Please, could we get a microphone to this lady?
I know. To answer the question there.
Thank you very much. So, hello, my name is Marilda Vescali. I work for BirdLife. And I wanted to go back to the stakeholders' engagement and question a bit what's happening right now with the CAP simplification package, where there was no stakeholder engagement. So I just wanted to ask to the panelists, what do you think about this procedure and how democratic do you think this is?
Okay, Catherine, we might turn to you on the CAP simplification measures tabled by the European Commission, developed by DG Agri, your colleagues in DG Agri. So sort of this lady is asking about the lack of stakeholder involvement in kind of formulating those provisions.
Yeah, true to say that this has been prepared as an emergency set of measures, indeed, in reaction to, in particular, the protest of the farmers. Where democracy will come in, I guess it's about the decision-making process. The European Parliament and the Council will have to make a decision on that. So I am not saying that the Commission is not expected to consult on legislative proposal, but I think it's important to remind ourselves that Council and Parliament are also the, let's say, the democratic representation
co-legislators, right?
of the two co-legislators are the representation of democracy there, and we'll see what will happen. Hopefully they will adopt this quickly. I understand that they want to move on. Maybe what I can say is that we are also looking at, though we are still in, I would say, in the middle of a difficult situation, farmers' protests continue, we are still working and try to learn also lessons from what has happened, because we do think that the level of ambition of the CAP when it comes to environment and climate is high and good. Some people may say it's too high, others say it's too low. This was high. So we need to see how we can further build on that, but we do also recognize that the level of details that we've come into to impose on farmers, a set of measures which is not just legislation but also agricultural practices, when you need to, to do this, at what time and what period and so on. So the lack of flexibility, in particular when you're confronted to extreme weather events and so on and so forth, we've come to a level that seems to bring some difficulties in terms of social farmers' acceptability. So we need to see also, when we're going to think about the next CAP, how can we do a better job in terms of environment and climate, while at the same time address some of the issues that we have observed in this current CAP. And of course, I'm very cautious here because we just have 1 year of implementation, but important to say that we will have opportunities to engage, and in particular to engage with you and with farmers about this.
Okay, thank you, Catherine, for that. Question. Jiří Sir, right, from The Czech Republic. Unless you've changed position recently, Jiří.
Yes,
You might have to
exactly.
remind me. You might have to remind me of your latest gig.
Thank you, Ms. Rosa. After 25 years, I've left the Ministry of Agriculture. Now I'm with the Federation of the Food and Drink Industries. Thank you very much for this interesting discussion. This panel discusses the question, what levers can the EU pull to deliver on the systemic change? And for me, it's been great to see now from the side of the industry, like in all the negotiations within the EU institutions, we forget to call on the farmers, food processors, and to frankly ask them, what do you think of the EU proposals? Sometimes we don't have the time because we are rushing to get the result as soon as possible. And on the way, we really lose many details. So I think as regards the levers, it should be stakeholder involvement, but the real one, over concrete proposals. And really this rethinking, like the food waste legislation now, 10% reduction, 20, whatever, how we do it. And when you talk to the companies, you say, we can't do it. We are running already so efficiently. If we want more, it will cost so much money, so much energy. We can't do it the way the EU institutions are trying. So we need to completely change really the way how we look at things. I agree with Jürgen that we have to change the order of things sometimes. And I would really ask, please not only involve the stakeholders, but ask for real impact assessments. Not those impact assessments which will approve the preferred option by the policymakers already before it starts the legislative process, but an impact assessment that will give us the real information on what the impact will be. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jiří. Am I hearing music in the background for some reason, or is that just me imagining things?
No.
Okay.
There is music.
So I might ask Martin, it's your fellow countryman and, if I recall correctly, your former colleague when you worked at the Permanent Representation. Do you have a reaction to that?
Yeah, it was more a comment than a question. No, I meet people on a forum. I meet people the. It's like a ballad, no?
Yeah, we're going to dance on the stage.
Okay.
soon.
Like that's like a ballad. I meet people in food industry and outside the industry. No, the pace, as you said, the pace is enormous, and inevitably some will be losers of this race. I think it's a pity that we have imposed but if Commission, and this is not critics to Catherine, but if Commission meant it when it comes to stakeholder engagement as of the moment Jürgen teared out the nature restoration law, we would not have seen a type of strategic dialogue, no, moderated by a professor from Germany. We would have most likely seen a change of a formal commission body that is there for consultation with stakeholders, no?
What do you mean?
Some of us
Consultation
remember
body?
SDG 20 years back, and some of us know the SDG today. And if somebody is complaining about lack of democracy, could we have that talk there? By the way, this is a moment of my life. I've seen after 20 years in Brussels for the first time activists complaining about lack of democracy.
What they're saying is lack of consultation, for example.
Yes,
on
but when we
measures
come
taken.
back to the SDG, why we don't change the pattern of the SDG where it was a couple of years back, where a balance between those who the legislation is about and imposed on are not in a almost life-threatening minority to those who have nothing to do with the sector. They have zero responsibility. They have zero capex in it. They have zero future of their shares in it and the responsibility for the employers, but they are dominating the debate in a democratic discussion with the Commission. So if Commission meant it, for me this strategy there is more of a von der Leyen window dressing before the election campaign type of.
Well, you're also in election mode as well yourself, to be fair, Martin.
If they meant it, they could have changed it, correct? They could have changed the structure of the SDG where the stakeholders would be proportionately, and I would say representatively, represented.
Okay. Maybe I'll get Catherine to respond. You're referring there to the stakeholder, what are they called again? The civil dialogue group. So Martin is saying a reshaping of the civil dialogue group rather than reinventing the wheel with the strategic dialogue. And we'll have to leave it there then, ladies and gentlemen, because we'll have to move on. So Catherine, maybe, yeah.
But shortly, I would say it's not one of the other or the other. I think we have civil dialogue groups, whatever we think about the way they work. It's true to say that now they are chaired by the Commission, so this has changed. They used to be chaired by stakeholders. Okay, maybe there will be also here lessons to be learned. We'll see that. I have little experience to be fair here, just to say that I've been working with them for 1 year. I try to make them, as open as possible, make sure also that we are not the only one in, the Commission is not the only one to set the agenda, so provide the opportunity also to put points on the agenda. Tried also to reduce the number of PowerPoint presentations so as to allow real dialogue and conversation, but I agree that we can do a better job. And it's not either the strategic dialogue or the civil dialogue group. The strategic dialogue was answering also to a particular problem, which was the polarization of the debate. And this form of dialogue is, I guess, also offering an opportunity to bring together also a couple of key representatives, though they are appointed ad personam, and I guess that Professor Strohschneider has mentioned that this morning. So a key representative of the key players of the food chain, and try to help us also to figure out whether we are still able, and I do believe we are still able, to have shared understanding, vision, and approach, and ready to look at the solutions.
Sure. And that's where we'll have to leave that then. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of where the discussion is going. We're it's a tabula rasa. We're looking ahead to the next administration, as you say, as Jürgen said, looking ahead to the future. So ladies and gentlemen, I am going to leave that there because maybe that was a hint for me to kind of get things rolling, the music in the background. So I would like you to give a warm round of applause to my distinguished panelists, Catherine Gisela-Laniel, Martin Lavacek, Jürgen Tak, and Stefania Vansi. You can please go back to your seats now. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.